So now I'm going to talk about Pete Wareham. I met Pete 26 years ago. He came and studied at Leeds College of Music. My shop in them days used to be the other side of Leeds. Discovered we hit it off with each other because the way we both work. He's a perfectionist. I'm a perfectionist. We only settle at when something is correct. We never. It'll do. That just never enters our life at all. It causes a lot of problems because you end up spending hours and hours and hours of what you're trying to achieve with each other. But if you're working with somebody who actually cares about where you actually work and actually understands and actually wants that, he draws more out of you. And I like to feel that was part of Pete's moving his career on further, developing his saxophones and repairing his early saxophones and stuff. So when I was working with Pete and I said to him, I'm going to design my own saxophone, his initial response was, well, yeah, it's a big task, is that, taking on designing a new saxophone, but I'll test it for you, but if it's shit, I'll tell you. I will tell you how rubbish it is if it is. I said, well, that's exactly what I wanted, and that's why I respect you, because I've known you a long time. I know that you won't patronise me. When you're working in the music industry and you put your heart and soul into a demo, new music that you actually 100% believe in, what you actually do is you actually give it to somebody and say, oh, well, you listen to this and tell us your honest opinion of it. And 90% of the time, whether it's your mother, whether it's your best friend, whether it's whoever, will go, oh, wow, it's amazing. And the minute you'll go out, your friend will say, what was it like? Oh, God, it was rubbish. I can't work with people like that. I have to have people who tell me to my face what it's like, because that's the only way you can actually improve. And if you get hurt by people's feelings, by what they actually say to you, then you're in the wrong business. You should just pack it in and go work on a standard 9-to-5 job. Not if you have that, then I'm not against that, because some people like that type of thing. It's just not for me. So you end up with Pete Wareham working with the saxophone, developing it all. So Pete's playing early Coltrane. He went down that sort of line. He then discovered his own type of sound, his own new technique. He actually he put so much air into his horn, so much power. So I actually built him a horn that was all yellow brass. So the frequencies that he's actually putting in, it helped him actually achieve what he wanted to do. Again, I worked with the actual tuning of the horn, so it actually, in these power positions, he could forget a lot about it, what he was actually trying to do with the horn. He could just get on and play it. He worked with his original Autolink mouthpiece, so I designed it so he actually worked with what he actually knew. I didn't want to change him and his mouthpiece and the horn all at the same time. So you do that by actually having the different diameters of the actual crook, the shape of the crook, the actual entry to the actual crook can all alter how you actually. It's more like it's the feedback you actually get. You need something to push against. You need that thing. If it's too much, then it holds you back, and if it's too easy, it just like blows through. So you wanted something to push against into it all. Like I said, Pete's very, very powerful. He uses a microphone down the bell. He shoves an SM58 down the bell. You'll probably see a lot of videos and a lot of things. You just see a wire coming out of the saxophone. What he has to do there is edit some frequencies out at the actual desk to get that to work, so it doesn't boom on certain notes when he's actually doing it. So you actually work with all that. I'm now going to show you a video of me when we went down to London. We went down to his house. Give him his first horn. He played it. He plays against his SBA that he's played for 20 years. He couldn't believe it when he originally played it. He played it, but looked at me, then played it, and he was just like lost for words. Then he played it again, and you'll see it in the video. And he's going, man, this is incredible. Since his first saxophone, I then made him another saxophone that we moved it on a little bit further, because I actually saw what he was actually trying to achieve more, because like I say, it brought more out of him than he was actually in his SBA he was actually using. So then since he's been on the sax, he's just sold his Selmer, which is a holy grail, but he just didn't do what he wanted it to do, mainly because it went thin when he went in the top sort of area, what he was actually doing. So I think you'll enjoy the videos, so enjoy.
Yeah, that's me. That
Yeah,
sounds like me.
yeah.
Yeah. Fucking great. It's fucking great.
It's there, isn't it?
Yeah.
grandma died when I was 14, some of the money from the house that they then sold, my granddad then sold, they gave me a bit of. And with that, I bought a saxophone. I bought a tenor saxophone, a Boozy and Hawkes La Fleur tenor saxophone, which fell apart constantly, and it was great at first, and then it was horrendous. And I used to go busking with it all the time, and it would always fall apart. So for ages and ages, I was like, oh man, I really want a proper saxophone. I want a proper saxophone. And getting a proper saxophone just seems to be such a long way off. It seemed so out of reach. And then finally, I think my parents realised that I was getting serious and that, that I needed a decent saxophone. They took me to Bill Lewington's and I bought a Yamaha. Can't remember what model it was now. And I had that Yamaha for ages, and I pretty much rinsed it. And it wasn't until I met Dave that I realised what a state it had got into. It was brand new when I bought it, or when they bought it for me. It was amazing, and it was a proper saxophone at the time, and it felt fantastic. It was so nice to have something that sounded so great. But still, I still had this thing in my mind of like, it's great, it's good, but it's still not quite right. And then I met Dave, and he fixed it, and he was amazed when we first met. I remember the first time we met was in 1992 probably, and I took it into his shop and said, look, I think that this is a bit of work doing, and he was amazed that could even get a note out of it. I think these are sort of things that he often gets with saxophone players. So he fixed it for me, and it was the first time. And then after that, I couldn't believe how great it was. Anyway, various things happened. Eventually, it got stolen from a house that I was living in Leeds, and I moved on to this Selmer that Dave gave me, which was amazing. It still wasn't the horn, but it was a good horn. It was a great horn. And Dave was a very close kind of collaborator, because he was obsessed with getting it right, absolutely obsessed with getting it right. And for me, it was incredibly important that it was right, because, you know, in those days, I was playing saxophone all day. I was playing for 12 hours a day. So I mean, it's like if there was a click or like something wasn't quite working, it was really, really annoying, and you couldn't focus, you couldn't concentrate on anything you were doing, because you had, if the horn wasn't right. And also, when you're working that hard on trying to make it sound good, if there's anything about the horn that is holding you back from sounding good, you want to fix it, because it feels really crap that you're working as hard as you possibly can to make something sound great, and there's something out of your control that's stopping it from sounding great. So it was a sort of an attempt to try and get a personal sound as well. You know, that was the thing that I was always after. Was to try and make it sound like me. That's what I wanted. I didn't want to sound like Coltrane. I didn't want to sound like Wayne Shorter. I didn't want to sound like somebody else. There were periods where I was studying those people, so yes, I did want to sound like them at the time, where I was trying to understand what they were all about. But ultimately, that was only so that I could get a deeper understanding of what I was about. And so my goal had always been to sound like me. And I worked really, really hard on tone. Really more, and scale, you know, obviously scales, but tone more than anything, to try and get that. And part of that obviously is the setup, and by that I mean, you know, the mouthpiece, the reed, and the horn. And you know, there are so many variables with the saxophone. I mean, as with any instrument, I would imagine with guitars and with drums, keyboards, you know, it's the same thing really. When you get that heavily into it and you're searching for your own sound, you know, you've got to have just the right pickup, just the right string, you know, just the right reed, just the right mouthpiece, just the right ligature. And Dave was always there for me. He was always like a guardian angel. He was just like, oh, check out these new ligatures. They just come out. This will help you, or this will help you, you know, or try this and try that. And he was always really, I would just go to his shop and hang out, and he'd, you know, just show me all these different things. And it felt like a kind of a mission for both of us, really, to try. I mean, he was doing it for everyone. He wasn't just doing this for me. He was doing it for everyone in Leeds and beyond as well. But people were travelling for miles, and still do, to go to see him. And at the time, especially in Leeds, you know, everyone I knew was going to see Dave, and Dave was the kind of the guru, because he really cared, you know, and he really wanted to achieve that that goal of making everyone get what they wanted from their horn, you know. And I think also there's a lot of myths, there's lots of materialism of like, my saxophone was more expensive, so my saxophone's better, or my saxophone was older, so my saxophone's better, or my saxophone's silver, so mine's better. You know, there's all this sort of materialism that is irrelevant. It's just about what saxophone is going to make you sound like you. It's not what's better or worse, or what's more expensive, or any of these things. It's just what's going to get you to where you feel that you can express yourself without the saxophone getting in the way. And that was where I was always trying to get to. So yeah, I've moved through various horns, and eventually, but the goal was always to get Mark 6. The Selmer Mark 6, vintage Selmer Mark 6 was always the kind of the goal. That was I knew that when I got a Selmer Mark 6, that would be it. Then I would have found my horn, I would have found the one, you know. So I was searching for one of those, and I got one. Dave, as always with Dave got me one, which was great, and it was really nice. It was a 50s one, but it wasn't quite right. And then there was this other one that came along, which was incredible. And there's a certain serial number for saxophone nerds. If you're a nerd, there's a serial number range that where the Selmer Mark 6 is the best, and it's around 60,000 apparently, which is around 1956, I think, or 55. I can't remember now, but around 60,000. If you get as near to 60,000 as you possibly can, you've got like one of the best horns you can get. And this horn that I found, or that Dave found, someone else was selling, was a 60,200 and something. So it was as near as damn it to the best one, and it was awesome. This horn was incredible. Yeah, I played that for ages, and then I started hanging out with this guy called Mark Turner, who's a tenor player from New York, who came over to the UK to do some gigs, and we sort of hung out, and he came around to my house, and we had a play and everything. And he was playing a super balanced action, which is even older. This is a 40s Selmer. And he's like, his playing is really fast, really kind of quite light and quite fast. And he was always slagging off the 6, you know, he was always sort of saying, oh, it's a tank compared to this. This is a work of art, and that 6 is like, I don't know, it's like a tank, like a piece of military equipment compared to this incredibly refined sculpture of a instrument that I've got, you know. I mean, he wasn't doing it in a bragging kind of way. He's a very, very humble, very lovely guy. But, you know, he's quite uncompromising when it came to saxophones. And a friend of mine had one as well. Ingrid Laubrock had one. So I was always envying hers. And obviously the super balanced action is the one that Coltrane played as well. So, you know, there's a mythology to it that I very much bought into. So this goal of getting the Mark 6, I'd reached the goal of the Mark 6. So then it was like, okay, now I need a super balanced action, you know, now I've got to get one of these. And yeah, eventually a super balanced action came up. I think it's before people had really cottoned onto them. So I managed to get a super balanced action, sort of trade the 6 in for the super balanced. I always trade a horn in for the next one. I never ever have more than one. Although you can see I've got 2 here, but this is a different type of one. But yeah, I've never really ever had more than one tenor, even though I know a lot of people do. I've just never been able to afford it. And so yeah, eventually I got this super balanced action, and this was an amazing horn, absolutely beautiful. 1947. It was an antique. It was everything that Mark had said it would be. It was a sculpture, you know, it was beautiful, it was really incredible. And I really felt like I could really express myself with this. Finally, I found a horn that I can really be myself with, you know. And that was it for quite a long time, to be honest. The search was over. I called off the search, you know. I found the mouthpiece. Dave had found me the mouthpiece, sorry. We had various metal Otto links going on. I've been playing one since day one. And then he found me this one, which I thought was vintage, which we thought was vintage because it looks really vintage, and turns out it's not, but I don't care. It sounds good, and that's the one I've used for 20 years. But the super balanced action I had for a long time. And that's around this time was when I started recording and started playing with bands who were recording and who had record deals and things like that. So a lot of those sort of Polar Bear, well, all of the Polar Bear and Acoustic Ladyland albums were done on that horn, and I really found my voice with that horn. The problem with that horn was that as you went up register, it got thinner. It cut through like hell, you know. It's brilliant, but and it had such a vibe, incredible, and just the ease of playing of it was something else. It's very light. If I'm not sure how nerdy I'm supposed to get here, but these keys here, the E flat, and also the B flat keys, and you can see that there, the B flat key, this one and that one were extremely small, so you could easily move your fingers around without getting lost in the keys. Also, these pearls, there's another sort of important point, was that these pearls here, when you get a new saxophone, the pearls are very concave, whereas with a vintage saxophone, they're flattened off, just because they've obviously been used so much. So they were flat, and also all the edges, all the corners, and all the sort of these little bits that you catch yourself on, they were all ground down because they're really old. So it was really soft. It felt quite soft. It felt it was really fast. And it was really, it felt a bit like the Yamaha that I'd originally had, which had quite a small bore to it, which is the sort of the thickness of the tube and how kind of like easy it is to play, but obviously the sound was something else. Anyway, so that was my horn, and I thought I'd found my horn, and everything was awesome. And then gradually over a period of time, Dave started saying, I'm gonna make a tenor, and I'm gonna make a tenor. Obviously, he agreed with me that the super balanced action that I had was awesome. Obviously, there's a whole other school of saxophones, which is the con school, where they're not as easy to play in terms of fingering, but they have a much thicker sound. And they don't go thin as you go high. They've got a very thick sound, but they're not easy to play sort of in terms of the ergonomics. The easiest one is the super balanced action, really. So Dave said, I'm going to make a horn that kind of combines both schools of saxophone. One that's got that kind of sound of the con, but has also got the ergonomic qualities of the Super BA. And so there'd been various horns over the years that Dave had been involved with that he'd always kind of said to me, what do you think of this? And I'd always said, I don't like it, because they're always too heavy. And, when you're comparing it to a super balanced action, you're really sort of comparing it to the best kind of horn you can get, really. So it was quite a kind of gold standard to compare it to. And also, I guess because I know who I am when I'm playing, and I know when I can be who I am. And if there's anything holding it back, I know what it is. So if everyone gets this, it's the same for everybody. But I can identify quite quickly, the same as anyone can, what it is that's holding it back. And if I'm not getting that thing, I can't play the horn. So often these kind of modern horns are too bright, they're too heavy, you can't get that sound that you're after. You can't get your own thing from it. If I couldn't get my own thing from a kind of a Mark 6, a sort of perfect Selmer Mark 6, I'm not going to get it from a kind of a Chinese, a recently manufactured Chinese saxophone. So anyway, he started making these horns, and I thought, okay, well, let's see how they turn out. And eventually, after quite a long time, he sort of experimented with various things. He said, look, I found this, I've made this horn, I think it's great. I want to bring it down to London and show you it. And it was the first one he'd made, and he brought it down. And I must admit, I'll be honest, I don't think I've said this to you, Dave, either, but I didn't have hugely high hopes, because I had played quite a few of these horns that you'd sort of said, look, this is amazing, check this horn out, it's just as good as your thing. And I played it, it was just like, no, it's not, clearly not. And he realised, as soon as he heard it back to back with the Super BA, he realised it wasn't as well. So I was kind of slightly prepared for it to be good, to be really good, but to not be quite what I needed. And I literally played it. I remember so vividly, I'll never forget it. My living room in London. He drove down from Leeds to London, which was, incredibly incredible. And he turned up on my door, on the doorstep with this tenor saxophone, and I really wanted to love it, because I just thought, well, you've just driven all this way, you put so much love into this, and he was always saying, I want this to be the best saxophone ever, I'm going to put all my heart and soul into this. So I really wanted to love it. I really didn't want to say it's not very good. And I put it in my mouth and I started playing it, and it blew my head off. It was absolutely incredible, to the point where I don't think I ever played the super balanced action again after that moment. I don't think I did. I literally put it in my mouth, played it, and was like, okay, that's my horn. And put the Super BA away and sold it. And just played that. And yes, the horn that he made was a bit heavier than the Super BA. And yes, the fingering wasn't quite as fast, but the sound was me. And the amazing thing was that, you know, obviously when you're buying vintage horns or you're buying any kind of horn, you're trying to get something that's someone else has made for somebody else, or for just, you know, to sell. So you can only ever get near, and suddenly we're having a conversation about what kind of alloy we might want to use for the metal. And because he's using red brass and yellow brass, and we're trying a red brass neck with a yellow brass back. This is the back. So a red brass neck with a yellow brass back and a red brass bell, or is it all going to be red brass, or is it, you know? So we were able to make those sort of decisions and talk about these various different combinations. And also we could even adjust the level of copper in the alloy. So this was getting to a level of personification, if you like, personalization, that you couldn't even get close to with a manufactured horn. Even if it is the best horn ever made, it's still not been made for you specifically. So it was incredible. I couldn't believe it. And I played that, and that was basically the beginning of Melt Yourself Down. So that first Melt Yourself Down record was done on that. It was the first time I'd recorded on anything that wasn't the Selmer. And yeah, and Shabaka started getting interested as well. He was like, "What is that horn? That horn is amazing." And sort of the word started to spread. And then gradually over time, Dave developed another one. And he said, "I think I've made one that's even better than the one you've got." And I sort of didn't believe him. And then he brought me this one. And this one was, yeah, it was, I didn't think it was possible to improve on the other one, but it was. And he brought me this one. And this is the second one he made. And I played all the others that he's made. Not all the others. I've played most of the other ones that he's made since then, and none of them come close to this one. I'm hanging on to it. Yeah, this is something else. This horn, as you can see, it's quite green, but it's got amazing. I don't know if you can see that amazing kind of where the lacquer's come off, and this is like the original kind of guard that he used. I don't think he's using these anymore, but I asked him to remake that because I love that S. So this is the second one, and it's just the most awesome horn in the world. I absolutely love it, and I rarely go at sort of a moment of me playing it. You know, if I do a gig or anything like that, quite often I'll text Dave afterwards and say, you know, this is the best horn in the world. And I've had it for, I don't know how many years I've had it for now. Probably about 5 years now. Probably, yeah, about 5 years, and I'm still learning it, really, still kind of developing what I can do with it. It's an incredible horn. And then gradually over time, kind of concurrent to this is I've always played baritones, and I've had many baritones over the years, because the baritone is the first thing I sell when I get skint, because it's not something that's, you know, it's not my main horn. Now with a baritone, you can have a low A baritone, which is a big one, or you can have a low B flat baritone, which is more like a jazz kind of thing. The low A baritone, the bell comes up to about here, because you've got to fit an extra one of these in to make that extra to go the semitone lower. So it's about up to here. They're big, really big, heavy things. And I had many baritones over the years, vintage ones. I had incredible vintage horns, you know, beautiful ones, all through Dave. I had some ones that I just bought on the cheap that were kind of falling apart. Sometimes fell apart quite easily, and then I had some really amazing ones. I played Selmer Balanced Action, you know, the sort of the gold standard of the baritones. I played Martin Handcroft with gold-plated bells, which is an amazing horn. You know, I played them all really. I had a Yanagisawa endorsement for a while, which was great. I mean, it was a low A modern manufactured Japanese horn. So it was okay. But then they said, "Well, I'd love to make a baritone," and I was like, "Well, you can't get low B flat baritones anymore, and these ones are smaller, so they're more fun." And he said he would make me one, so he made me one. He started by sending me the pictures of the sheet of metal that he was making it from, which blew my mind. You know, just a sheet of metal, and then the various machines and things. So I kind of saw this baritone went even further than the tenor in a way, because this was built for me. I mean, it's almost like it was ordered for me, and you know, I saw the pieces of metal that it was made from, which is just pretty mind-blowing, really. I mean, it's incredible the level of generosity that Dave it just finds natural is really incredibly unique because you know, he's given me these horns, and I'm really humbled by it because it's an incredible investment in me that he's shown, and we've been friends now for a long time, 26 years, and yeah, it's just I'm blown away by how generous he's been and how incredible these horns are, and what a difference he's made to my career, really, my playing career. And now I'm using this baritone all the time, and it's really informing what I do with Melt Yourself Down. I used it all through the third album, and I'm really discovering what the baritone saxophone can do itself, not just in my band, but actually what it's capable of doing. Because to have a low B flat baritone that's modern, so it's not kind of falling apart, is incredible, and it's a beautiful horn. So that's a potted history of my Boy Meets Horn. But yeah, these horns are something else, and they continue to evolve as well. I really hope that they carries on making them and bringing joy to so many people.